The major finding here is that large block-like systems formed by unilineal descent groups tend to get eroded by the more flexible and more network-like systems such as our own. What tends to happen is that the functions carried out by these blocks tend to be taken over by other institutions. For example, the deprivation of the political and administrative functions seems to have undermined the patriclans of ancient Rome, of the Zulus, and of China. As the central administration became more effective, as justice was administered from the middle, then the role of the clan and the lineage was undermined. For example, homicide began to be dealt with in the king's court rather than by the rules of the blood feud dictated by kinship. Again, economic changes, the rise of wage labor and cash cropping, breaks up the interdependent ties between kin in matrilineal societies. For example, as described for the Nayars of South India by Elizabeth Goff, you no longer need to rely on your kin for help in production and distribution of goods, and so the market integrates you in a new way and kinship falls away. Residential associations are also broken up by migrant labor. Members of the family move away, can earn wages, and no longer are dependent on their parents. Social and spatial mobility, individual ownership, and the written will, which allows you to disinherit your children. The rise of insurance facilities, which makes it no longer absolutely essential to have children, no longer absolutely essential to look after your old. The rise of banks. All these things break up unilineal descent groups and the peasant family. Whereas the agnatic systems was a powerful force in law and defense, a predatory military organization, as Marshal Salins has described it, for waging war, and many of these societies built up their defense systems through their kinship system. Whereas the matrilineal system, according to Mary Douglas, was efficient in spreading risks in simple economic systems where the harvests were perishable and irregular. In such societies, these difficulties are now dealt with by other forces. So that gradually you seem to get the erosion, the growth of the Western family model over much of the world. Thus, Hobel, for example, the anthropologist, writes that the clan, the proudest and the most powerful social institution among the higher primitives, disappears from civilized society. It was supplanted by the national state, which suppressed the clan and brought internal order. A classic example would be the destruction of the clan system in 18th century Scotland. Another would be the destruction of the peasant economy, which prevailed over much of Western Europe, even until the end of the 19th century. But with the rise of nationalism and the nation-state has more or less disappeared. But again, rather than thinking of a straight evolution, life is not as simple and as uniform as this. Lineage ties still remain extremely important, even in urban and industrial settings, in India, Africa, and even in Europe. The famous Chinese lineages in the new territories of Canton have flourished and expanded with Western methods. They may jet around from place to place and have multi-million-pound dealings in oil and airlines, but they still base this on a lineage system. The Cosa Nostra and the Mafia still operate through the family in organized crime, and cocoa farming in Ghana, as Polly Hill has shown, is still based on matrilineal kin groups. In conclusion, there is no irreversible process and no predictable future of clan organizations and the change from unilineal descent groups to our flexible cognatic system. One can't, as an anthropologist, predict what will be happening when people watch this film in 100, 200 years. By that time, they may have adopted Adelphic polyandry. They may have the institution of the couvard, that is, institution of people, husbands, going through birth pains when their wife goes through birth pains, which is a widespread institution. They may be marrying each other before they're born. One can't tell. At that time, it will be refreshing for an anthropologist to look back and look at the predictions I've made here. What one can say, though, is that at the moment there seems to be an erosion, rather like detergents erode oil. Throughout the world, the Western family models, along with Western industrial and other models, are spreading and eroding many of the traditional family systems. In my last talk, I want to look at the theoretical ways in which anthropologists have tried to understand kinship systems.